What's up, guys? So my last video that I did was called "To an Angry Satanist," and it's I'm not responding to that individual with this video. I would like very much for that specific discussion to be done, but someone responded to that video with an observation that made me decide to reach out, not reach out, but check and see if the Church of Satan themselves had ever addressed the accusations of plagiarism against Anton Lavey. And before we go any further, patreon.com/JordanOwen42 if you want to help me grow the channel and not feel a cold rush of fear every time I check my bank balance. And then also my band Axis of Empires just put out the first single from what is going to be a remixed and remastered re-release of our third album. So that's now available. It's the song, the album is Heretics and Orthodoxy, and we are in the process of just completely revamping the thing. In terms of productions, sonic production, and mixing and mastering and all that. It's going to sound really cool when we get it all done. But for now, the first taste of that is available. The song Orthodoxy. What am I pointing to? The song Orthodoxy is available on all streaming services, so go check that out. It's just great classic power metal in the vein of Stradivarius and Helloween and Gamma Ray and all that stuff. So anyway, but one of the through lines from that discussion, which is what I'm building on, is the accusation which I levy at Anton Lavey, like many others, which is that he plagiarized the book, plagiarized portions of the book Might is Right by Ragnar Redbeard for the purpose for inclusion in the Satanic Bible. If you're just joining us, I was into this stuff, and I am embarrassed to say that I was into this stuff for about 2 years of my early 20s before very publicly leaving it all behind. And now, uh, I am a follower of Christ about 18 years later, or many years later, although it's been about 8 years at this point that I've been considered myself a follower of Christ. Anyway, but I'm very much in the other camp all these years later. So, I had originally used if you've read the Satanic Bible and looked into it at all, you will know that there is a chapter of the book that is taken almost verbatim, almost word for word, from a book called Might is Right by Ragnar Redbeard. And when this theft was found out, Lavey did not own up to what he had done. He simply pivoted and started touting himself as the ultimate Ragnar Redbeard fanboy. And that is not, that is not any kind of integrity. It's not any kind of honesty or decency or anything like that. And I was curious, and that was one of the points I made, just as an example, and just an example of his chicanery. And I was curious, somebody made a point on that last video. They said that Might is Right was in the public domain when Anton Lavey appropriated it. And so that got me thinking, and I will concede that point, yes it was. But that got me thinking, I wanted to see if the Church of Satan had actually said anything about this. And so I looked up looked it up and found this essay from the Church of Satan website called Anton Lavey and the Right of Might by Magister Kevin I. Slaughter. I don't know who Kevin Slaughter is. I looked him up, and I was aware of the publishing house that he owns, Scapegoat Press. I was aware of that. But beyond that, I don't know the man personally, don't have anything against him, and I'm certainly not trying to instigate anything with him. This is just a response to ideas, and while I I would imagine whoever Kevin Slaughter is, he probably doesn't really care what I think. I say that so that I don't, I don't piss off the legion of Kevin Slaughter fans that probably exists out there, uh, and is going to feel that they have to rise to the occasion to defend their, etc., etc. Anyway, so as I sit to comment on this essay, if you want to look it up, what I did was I outlined it because it is very, very, very long and very, very pretentiously worded. And so I just summarized it with a couple of quotes from it as needed, but the essay is there if you want to verify the accuracy of what I'm saying and that kind of thing. And I'll say a little more about why this matters to me at the end, but I just wanted to break down, I began this talking about how the Church of the Satanic philosophy is not any kind of philosophy that's going to help you live a good, productive, happy life. It's really a pretty shitty philosophy, and this essay is a pretty good example of what I'm talking about. So first, the essay opens with a quote from a character in a Jack London book that says, quote, "Might is right, and that's all there is to it. One man cannot wrong another man. He can only wrong himself," close quote. So that's what we're starting out with, and that's going to be very much the through line of this whole thing. Two, it goes on to say, the essay proper begins with a lengthy biography of Arthur Desmond, the most likely author of Might is Right, and how he, quote, "also borrowed a great deal from contemporary sources, often merely changing a few words and from even the most famous poets of the day," close quote. So this sets up, again, another moral through line that they're establishing here, which is essentially all of this is going to boil down to them trying to argue that two wrongs make a right. But anyway, 3, the essay then claims that Lavey founded the COS, quote, nearly a century later from the, quote, close quote, from the publication of Might is Right. 1966 is 69 years after 1897. That would only be almost a century if we were rounding up from 50. But anyway, the essay then argues that the original publication of the Satanic Bible features, among other things, a dedication to the author of Might is Right, which read, quote, "Ragnar Redbeard, whose might is right, period," close quote. Okay, this actually contradicts and eliminates a clarification that even I offered in my original argument. I had been under the impression that the first edition of the Satanic Bible had a citation source attributing this to attributing those specific passages that were used to Ragnar Redbeard, aka Arthur Desmond, most likely. It did not even have that. It had a mention of him in the dedication on the dedication page. Okay. This is something that people will do to try to have it both ways. They think that if they offer some kind of perfunctory thank you to generalized thank you to the person in question, then they don't have to cite what of the persons they're actually using. No, just putting a dedication in there to Ragnar Redbeard is not enough. By doing that, you are not acknowledging people who don't know who Ragnar Redbeard is and don't know this the book that you're drawing from, which is going to be most people, are not going to know that you are taking this writing verbatim from this source just because you thanked him in the dedication page. No, that doesn't work. It's not enough to portray it as your own work and then tangentially mention him among a list of thank yous. However, that reference to Ragnar Redbeard was removed later by the publisher, as the essay acknowledges, but we'll get to that in a minute. So then the essay pivots to talking about how Temple of Set founder Michael Aquino left the Church of Satan after falling out with Lavey, and that he was one of the first people to sound the alarm about the plagiarism of Midas Wright, which had been an element in his decision to leave the Church of Satan. The essay goes on to acknowledge another critic, Sidney E. Parker, who recognized the stolen portion of Midas Wright was a verbatim recreation of the original with only a few minor edits. The essay then emphasizes Parker's quip that given the moral system in question, Desmond would likely have considered being ripped off in this way to be a, quote, backhanded compliment, period, close quote. I'm not dictating it. Why did I say period, close quote? Anyway. And this is again going to be their eventual argument, or the eventual conclusion of their argument. The essay quotes from an essay written by Peggy Nadramia, who claimed that although the dedication to Ragnar Redbeard was removed in later editions, this was a decision by the publisher, not Anton Lavey himself. Once again, that dedication does not indicate that Anton Lavey is not an acknowledgement of what Anton Lavey took from the writings of Ragnar Redbeard or Arthur Desmond to use in the Satanic Bible. It does not acknowledge what he did. And then it goes on to say, the essay then, or point 8, sorry, the essay then says, quote, when someone is found guilty of plagiarism, they are sometimes stripped of titles or awards, fired from jobs, dispossessed of academic credentials, and generally cast out of good society. But is any of this opprobrium fitting for Satan's emissary on earth? Do we scold the founder of, quote, the world's most dangerous religion, close quote, for textual impropriety? Do we no longer trust the man representing the father of lies? Silly, isn't it? Close quote. And, okay, so, again, this is one of those things where if posed the question, did Anton Lavey plagiarize from Ragnar Redbeard, they are incapable of just saying no. And so this argument that Anton Lavey gets some kind of special pass because he's doing all of this evil theatricality doesn't really mean a whole lot if we don't have an objective agreement on what is right or wrong moral conduct. And that's eventually going to be the real hypocrisy of that is going to be elaborated on here. But it goes on to say, 9, the essay then point 9, the essay then emphasizes that the Midas Wright portion only constitutes around 1,500 words only constitutes around 1,500 words over 6 pages of a 272-page book. And so again, this is a very wormy, mealy-mouthed little argument. Come on, it's not that much. Come on, it wasn't very much. It's 6 pages. Come on. There's like a bunch more pages that are totally okay. Yes, I'm so bad at math I couldn't subtract 272 minus 6 off the top of my head. Public education, man. Anyway, and then it goes on. The essay then seeks to address the accusations of plagiarism in 3 categories, asking the question, did Lavey commit an illegal act of plagiarism? Did Lavey commit a literary act of plagiarism? And did Lavey commit an unkind act of plagiarism? Put a pin in that word unkind because we're going to come back to it. So I will concede, of course, the legal argument, no, it was not. It was in the public domain. Now, the thing about that, though, as it comes back to, imagine if somebody published a book of poetry, of their original poetry, it has their byline to it, and the first poem began, once upon a midnight dreary, as I pondered weak and weary, and then you realized very quickly that this entire poem was taken verbatim from The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, with maybe 1 or 2 stanzas deleted, but ultimately it's just The Raven, and you go to that person and you say, you're portraying this as your own writing, and you say, Well, yeah, but it's in the public domain, and I thanked Edgar Allan Poe in the dedication page for how awesome I thought he was. No, it's still not your writing. It's still not your writing. It's still you're still just ripping this person off, and the fact that you deleted a couple of stanzas doesn't make it any less of a rip-off job. Anyway, so going on, the essay addresses the second question by claiming that what Lavey did constituted adequately reworking the source material into something original. The basis for this claim is that Lavey omitted parts of the source material because they were racist, sexist, and anti-Semitic, and claims that this is comparable to the art of photo collage. Okay, so that's actually not that easy. It's actually not as cut and dry as that, and it's still ultimately just a complete load of crap. But um, yes, he did eliminate lines that were racist, sexist, and anti-Semitic to make it ostensibly to make it as widely appealing as possible. But the bottom line on this, and again, just because none of this could have been taken to court, just because it was outside the bounds of copyright law, does not mean that the law does not provide us with a reasonable framework for evaluating these things. And in the case of something like this, what they're trying to do in a legal context would be arguing that this was a transformative work. Okay, there are examples of transformative works that are completely valid. One of the more outstanding examples of that is rap music that very often uses samples from other artists. And when it is properly done from a legal standpoint, those samples are scrupulously cataloged and acknowledged. And acknowledged within the publication of the material, and it's all cleared with the people involved, the people whose work is being used. That would be a transformative work, and photo collage would be a transformative work because it is by its very nature, there is an obvious understanding that what you have done is take pre-existing pieces of media and collage them back in, recombine them into something new. That is understood in the medium itself. So there's not so you could, in something like that, you could more adequately argue that yes, it's a transformative work. I'll give you an example of a transformative work in that regard that I did. Years ago, just to amuse myself, I circulated a meme based on my belief that tattoos don't really look good on women. Now, that's not a deal breaker for me. I have dated women with tattoos. The way things are going, that may end up being the only kind of women that are available to me to date. But so it's not a deal breaker, but I personally just don't think tattoos look good on women. Women are already beautiful. They don't need help. Men on the other hand, in my opinion, my humble estimation, need all the help they can get. Please do not harangue me with a bunch of, "You can't tell her what to do with her body." I don't need to hear that. I'm not challenging anyone's right to do what they want to do with their body. I am simply expressing my opinion, which does not challenge or contradict your right to do whatever you choose with your body as a consenting and informed adult. Anyway, but the point of that is I made a meme that said, "Beautiful women with tattoos be like," and I then added to that statement a picture of the Mona Lisa and put all kinds of clip art of stickers, stickers and graffiti and all kinds of stuff all over it. Okay, so that is a transformative work. First of all, it would be very reasonable to argue that the Mona Lisa is such an incredibly obvious piece, or such an incredibly well-known piece of art, that no one would think I had actually created it myself. And secondly, I was not actually trying to pass it off as my own work. I was actually, what I created there actually hinged on people getting the joke I was making, which is that tattoos to me look like you're just putting graffiti on the Mona Lisa. That hinges on people appreciating it, hinges on the fact that it is so widely known that I don't have to explain to people what it is. And so that would be an example of a photo collage that's a transformative work. That creation was mine, But that, and I don't know where that meme has been passed around to, if it's been passed around at all, so I don't know where it's been posted. I just put it on my Facebook and, like Twitter and I think Instagram, and just cast it out to the wind. So wherever you find it, please don't consider that an endorsement from me. But that would be an example of a transformative work. It would be quite another thing. It would be quite another thing. Or sorry, what Anton Lavey has done is quite another thing. What Anton Lavey has done is much more in line with what I described with misappropriating the Raven and presenting it as an original work, simply because there's been a few edits here and there. Okay. The essay then addresses the moral argument by pointing out that although one of the 11 satanic rules of Earth expressly forbids stealing, it doesn't count in the case of Ragnar Redbeard's own philosophy, because his philosophy allowed for what Lavey would have allowed for what Lavey did, simply because Ragnar Redbeard is no longer among the living, and there were no forces strong enough to no mortal forces strong enough to stop Lavey from doing what he did. Therefore, in their estimation, they think he had a right to do it, which completely voids the concept of any kind of respect for property law at all. If any of your moral premises have an asterisk on it that says "unless you can get away with it," then you don't have a moral premises. I mean, anyone who's listened to Tool knows that how infuriating it is to deal with somebody who thinks that and I'm quoting here, if consequences dictate your course of action, it's only wrong if you get caught, close quote. Those are awful, loathsome people, and that's from the song Jerk Off by Tool. Because, frankly, yeah, people who think that way are jerk-offs. They're the most loathsome people you can possibly imagine. Anyway, so then it tries to further justify it by saying that Arthur Desmond himself was a plagiarist, again bringing back that original point, that Arthur Desmond himself was a plagiarist, so this was just the pot calling the kettle black. That metaphor, the pot calling the kettle black, would only apply if Anton Lavey himself was the one criticizing Arthur Desmond for being a plagiarist. God, anyway. But furthermore, again, it just, if your moral code boils down to two wrongs make a right, you don't have much in the way of morality. If your moral premises do not hold true across all circumstances, then they're not your moral premises. Now, that's not to say that you won't have situations where you have to make moral compromises, and you have to weigh those as you go. Weigh those along as you go. That will happen. But that's very different from simply making the argument of theft is wrong. Theft is wrong. Asterisk unless you can get away with it. Again, once you add that to it, once that's your moral once that's your moral basis for compromising your moral code, you don't have a moral code. Anyway. Then the essay concludes by claiming that objections to what happened are just born out of the moral shortcomings of the people making the objections. And by the way, one I forgot to include here, but it's also worth pointing out, he also brings up the point that there is a scholar of religious studies, an academic scholar of religious studies, that did not agree that what Lavey did constituted plagiarism in the strictest sense. Even this person could not flat out say that it absolutely was not plagiarism. They could just say, all they could do is at best say that it was a kind of transformative work. Okay, ultimately all that is an argument from authority fallacy. And a person in a position of authority can still be wrong, they can still have bad ideas. Anyway, but the essay concludes by claiming that objections to what happened are born out of the moral shortcomings of the people making the objections, and that these people are really just uncomfortable with the brazen disregard for conventional morality espoused by the Church of Satan. Yes, I am, actually. I totally admit that. Yes, it makes me very uncomfortable. These people who make it, who are proudly, and I actually don't think very many of these people really operate on this premise. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that there's like an evil cabal of Satanists out there. I'm saying this is a lot of pomp and circumstance and a lot of pretentiousness that doesn't amount to very much, and it really would not work out well for you if you actually put this into practice, and the people who are espousing this bullshit know that. But anyway, it is, however, scary to think that there are people who are proud of the fact that they have no moral compass whatsoever, are proud of the fact that they have are proud of the fact that their highest moral good is having their highest concept of moral good is having no concept of the moral high ground whatsoever, except to be as brazenly self-serving as possible. That is scary, and that is upsetting, and that does not reflect badly on me at all. That does not reflect a weakness on my part. That reflects a tremendous amount of wisdom on my part. And so yeah, that is concerning. Now, again, I have to be very careful here and say, once again, no, I don't think that there is any all of the Michelle Remembers stuff, all of the satanic panic bullshit, all of that is bullshit, all of that is crap. It is completely bunk. I'm not arguing in favor of any of that. That is bullshit. So when I say that this is not a good moral philosophy, we're talking at the philosophical level. Again, I would imagine if we actually dealt with this Kevin Slaughter person in person, we probably would not have a great deal of difficulty, because whether he wants to admit it or not, he actually does adhere to most of the precepts of the moral code that we all interact. We all agree to, the social contract we all agree to interact with each other every day. That said, I would not be totally comfortable trusting. He's not someone I would trust when the chips are down, put it that way. Anyway, so, yeah, that is concerning to me. But I wanted to close with, I talked about when I was trying to get across to that other person, and this is a more general a more general comment, not just to them. But I wanted to when I was trying to get across to the other person, I pointed out that the Church of Satan puts things out like this, and this person wanted to try to cite all of these Church of Satan, official Church of Satan commentaries and tracts that have come out through the years to try to address these concerns. And the reason I wanted to do this is because to show that the reason I don't put any I don't put a lot of moral weight or a lot of validity or a lot of weight into the crap the Church of Satan puts out to justify these accusations is because they always do shit like this. It's kind of like, again, the answer to talking about Michelle Remembers, which, if you don't know, Michelle Remembers is a long discredited hoax book that was put out by this doctor and his patient who eventually married each other. That was claiming to be the memories of satanic abuse that this woman had uncovered thanks to hypnosis and all that. Long story short, it's a complete hoax. It was always a hoax. There's never been any degree of merit to it, and in more than 40 years since its publication, there's never been any merit to to the arguments contained therein. I'm not, and so in the case of that, the question, if you ask one of the Church of Satan members, is there any truth to Michelle Remembers, they would just say no. The minute they have to start going, well, that's when the doubt creeps in. There's no doubt that Michelle Remembers is a load of crap. There's also no doubt that this is a load of crap. But I wanted to conclude, bringing all that around to say, though, that one of the things I talked about is that I'm very familiar with the demoralizing tone that Lavey and Satanists will try to use to combat the ideas of people they disagree with, and I emphasize to that person that really is not going to work on me, because I see it for what it is from the outset. And this essay, the whole essay, is really is written in this style, but I'll just give you the final paragraph to give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about. And I'm going to read it in this, what it sounds like to me internally when I read this, what it sounds like. And now, dear reader, I complete this little tale. I do not write to persuade the envious or convert the scolding. Most are not driven by principle, but by the petty... You can't write an essay extolling what you see as the virtues of having no principles whatsoever and then turn around and say we're the ones that aren't driven by principle. Anyway, most are not driven by principle, but by the petty reflexes of volunteer hall monitors and dollar-store devil horns. They masquerade as radicals while wagging fingers in defense of a tattered moral consensus they barely understand. But for my part, having weighed their accusations, sifted the facts, and found nothing of substance between the noise, I raise my pen one final time and scrawl across their flimsy bill of complaint in the very words of Redbeard himself, "Gone bung." I love that. I love that that's how it ends. This book this essay that spends God knows how many words bloviating about how Satanists are superior to you because they don't feel the need to cite their sources, provided that they can find, loopholes, moral loopholes that they themselves are comfortable with, thinking that this is going to impress anyone of any substance. After this entire essay of this shit, he closes with a citation to Ragnar Redbeard. Why didn't you just have the strength of your convictions, buddy? Why didn't you just quote that right out of... Why didn't you... In fact, Ragnar Redbeard definitely did not invent the phrase "gone bung." That's an outdated version of that's an outdated version of saying it's been debunked or something like that. But why didn't you just appropriate it like the badass you think Anton Lavey was? For there are whole lengthy paragraphs in this essay going on about what a badass Anton Lavey must have been to just snatch that right up and use it for himself and say "fuck you" to everybody else, because the reason he did it because he really understands Ragnar Redbeard's philosophy. Yeah, just all of that, on and on and on. And then it says, in the preceding paragraph, it says, what motivates these critics is an unease with the unfathomable ideas at the heart of Satanism, and might is right. With no small measure of duplicity, they presume to dictate what is and is not permissible within Satanism, even as they deny that right to the very man who created it. Okay. I'm not presuming to dictate what is and is not acceptable within Satanism. I know this is done in response to people like Michael Aquino, but I'm not presuming that at all. I'm telling people not to get into this shit one way or the other. But what's amazing is they talk, he wants to talk about what is and is not acceptable within Satanism, as if this behavior is acceptable among Satanists. And then he goes on to cite all of these sources, all of his sources for this article. He cites all of them in a lengthy set of footnotes. And he does. There is one of his footnotes here does cite, while plagiarism is not a legal offense, the term is often used colloquially to refer to copyright infringement, i.e., the unauthorized use of protected material without attribution or permission. Correct. But again, that does not get us out of the woods on this. I just love that. Like, why didn't you just stick true to your guns and rip off all of these people instead of, I'm sure he probably has some kind of explanation like, well, I like Peggy Nadramia and Peter Gilmore as friends, and they're my friends, and I wouldn't want to screw them over because that would have a negative impact on me, and God. That crap's only going to carry you so far. Again, it doesn't take a lot. He talks about, the rest of us who would have a problem with this being being kind of the ignorant plebeians of the world, and my summation of how he would describe it. And understand, I mean, as far as, acts of evil in the world go, this is hardly a blip on the radar. I mean, this is of no great consequence, other than what it says about Anton Lavey and people who would defend him, which is still of no great consequence. But it is to kind of make a point for people, make a point to people who are considering this sort of thing. And I say this as someone who has been there himself, and I can't tell you I had some kind of great come to Jesus moment that saved me from Satanism or something like that. No, I was into this for a little while in my early 20s and just kind of lost interest in it after a while and moved on to other things. And coming back to Christ didn't happen until about a decade or so later. But what I would say, if you're someone who's considering this sort of thing, don't make an ass of yourself. You're not, if you have any kind of moral integrity at all, you're not going to be able to espouse this level of preening, pretentious bullshit. And again, the whole thing, I draw a great comparison between Satanism and the pickup artists, because it's a very similar thing of trying to put one over on people and hoodwink people with bullshit and that kind of thing. And I love how the more vicious pickup artists out there, which is most of them, will try to go on at length talking about how they teach you all of these things like negging and withholding affection and withholding praise and strategically demonstrating to a woman that she has to do something for you before you'll compliment her and all of these things. They make a very, very strong point of making sure that you impart to the woman that you don't care what she thinks at all. That you don't care you have no regard for her opinion or her approval. You don't need it. You don't want it. You don't care one way or the other. You're lucky to have her. She's lucky to have you. All of that stuff. That's their position. And the thing is, it's horse shit. You're just lying to yourself. The fact that you're lying to yourself is axiomatic, in fact, because you cannot say I want you cannot say I want to have sex with this. I want to gain the consent of this woman to have sex with her, but I don't care what she thinks of me. That's horse shit. The minute you act to get you act to gain the sexual consent of this woman, you are fundamentally confessing that you care about what she thinks of you enough to get her consent out of her. And as I described with scumbags like Rouge V, at least as he was or as he claimed to be, and Andrew Tate as he definitely is, some of these guys don't really have much regard for consent at all. But even then, they tout their accomplishments with women as proof of their validity, their worth as a man, and that kind of thing. It's totally bupkis to say that you don't care about impressing women when you've devoted your entire life to doing exactly that. And that's the same thing that we have to come around to with people like this. Who was Kevin Slaughter writing this for? Presumably himself, if he really doesn't care about what anyone else thinks. And I'm sure you could say that he was writing it in some way to you probably get some excuse like he was writing it in some way to address any legitimate misgivings or concerns that might have cropped up among people and that kind of thing. But the fact of the matter is, you don't address legitimate misgivings and concerns with paragraph after paragraph of pretentious bupkis. Or bung, as Redbeard would have it. Anyway, it all goes back to my point that there's not a lot of personal depth or personal growth to be found in Satanism, and that's the real thing. Not that it's going to make you go summon a devil and rape a bunch of children and stab a bunch of old people to death or something like that. It's not going to make you go on a killing spree. It's not going to it's not going to turn you into some kind of con artist, successful con artist, or anything like that. It's just not going to add anything worthwhile or productive to your life, and at best, it's going to make you a very pompous and pretentious person that most people can see right through very quickly. I've talked a lot about the fact, or mentioned a lot about the fact that my favorite, my two favorite movies are Blade Runner and Secret of Nim, and they kind of vie for the number one slot, but Blade Runner usually gets it. But Secret of Nim is a phenomenal movie, and it's my favorite animated movie, definitely. And if you've seen the film, it's an excellent movie. It's based on an excellent novel, and the conflict. It deals with a world of talking rodents and mice and rats and their associated companions, various birds and that kind of thing. But the conflict ultimately comes to a head between two characters, one of which is Justin, and the other, Justin, who is the captain of the guard, of the rat guard, who very much represents like a officer and a gentleman kind of values and that sort of thing. And Jenner, the character of Jenner, who is absolutely the kind of person that Anton Lavey is advocating for you to be. Diabolical, sinister, sneering, ready to screw over anybody for his personal gain, all of that. And in the final conflict between Jenner and Justin, Jenner, moments before he's defeated, says, "I've learned this much. Take what you can when you can." And also, talking that way will dry you out. That's another reason not to do it. Anyway, so, but Jenner says, "I've learned this much. Take what you can when you can." And Justin replies, "Then you've learned nothing." And that's it, folks. I mean, that's at bottom. When you read this shit, when you get into it, when you try to put it into practice, it's a lot of noise and a lot of verbiage to learn absolutely nothing.